Hello everybody, this is Sun Random Neko, waking up from her nap to greet the world for the day. And by greet, I mean revisit the best graphic novel film adaptation Netflix has made, which isn't really saying much, but it's impressive that it actually happened, called The Old Guard, because the sequel is coming out in a few days, and I wanted to refresh my memory while putting this great action film on everyone's radar. A group of mercenaries with the inability to stay dead have fought to protect the world for centuries in secrecy. When their extraordinary abilities are suddenly exposed, they must eliminate the threat of those who seek to replicate their power for monetary gain and fight to protect their freedom with the help of the newest immortal to join their ranks in over 200 years. The story of the Old Guard is exactly as advertised in the summary, and its concept is one that's been done before a million times already. You've got a band of immortal warriors fighting the good fight, a villain who wants to use them to turn a profit, a scientist who sees them as the way to a Nobel Prize, a guy who wants to use their immortality to cure disease because of a dying or dead loved one, and the age-old debate on whether immortality is a gift or a curse, with the added philosophical bonus of why were they made immortal in the first place, and when do they stop being immortal. However, even with a concept that's definitely not new, the characters manage to sell the premise without making it feel like a 2-hour slog. Charlize Theron in particular carries the film without breaking a sweat as Andromache the Scythian, or Andy for short, and makes everything she does seem believable in a way most female action heroes haven't been able to do in recent times. She played an exceptionally skilled mercenary who's older than Jesus, and casually dropped the line that she was once worshipped as a god, and all I could do was nod and go, yeah, that sounds about right. She's the best thing about this film and nailed her character from the very first line. Next, we have Nile, the new immortal on the block who brings a different perspective into the immortality business. She was a bit annoying at first with all her questions and pushback, but it was understandable given she's a 21st century Marine who just died only to wake up completely fine, then get treated like an outcast by her fellow soldiers, kidnapped to join an immortal band of warriors, and has no choice but to sink or swim after being thrown into the Mariana Trench of Deep Ends. Then we have Nikki and Joe, once enemies on opposite sides of the Crusades, now immortal husbands whose relationship is so wholesome that they make you believe in soulmates. Theirs is an LGBT+ relationship in a mainstream action film that doesn't feel forced or stereotypical in any way, and they're also given agency that has nothing to do with their sexuality, and are allowed to get stuff done instead of just being forced to the sidelines waiting to be rescued. And if you want to see the real and painful consequences of immortality, you need look no further than Booker and Quinn. Booker is a Frenchman who served under Napoleon, and is weighed down by his immortality due to his mistake of staying in his family's life after his first death, which led to painful resentment. Then there's Quinn, who was the first immortal Andy found and is a certified badass just like her. While it's not outright stated, it's heavily implied that she and Andy were in a relationship, which makes their separation more tragic as Quinn is used to show the real danger and traumatizing consequences of getting caught. I love how these two, and Andy by extension, have the most emotionally raw scenes in this film as they show us the true weight and consequences of having immortality. And finally, we have our antagonists, Copley and Merrick. Copley is an interesting stand-in for the guy in the chair trope, and despite all he's done, you can't help but empathize with him considering he has very human motivations for why he did what he did. And Merrick is basically just a comic book film villain, nothing more, nothing less, and that's completely fine all things considered. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the characters really sell the film despite the story being a bit lackluster. In fact, the most interesting parts are the history the characters live through that's shown through flashbacks or mentioned in conversation or as an offhand remark. I like how they tied the flashbacks to the story, making them relevant instead of things that just pop up. I like how the film lets its characters have small moments that allow us to see the weight of the history they live through. I also like how the whys of immortality are purposely vague, allowing each immortal to have different fates and interpretations, further fleshing out their characters. And while the theme of the film is sometimes an afterthought, I again love how the characters sell everything about it. Like you really believe the Old Guard, and Annie in particular, have lived so long they can no longer see what's ahead of them, getting so caught up in the small details in the jobs they do, that they're no longer able to stop to smell the roses or notice the bigger picture anymore. And I appreciate that they do eventually get to see the extent of that bigger picture in the end. In regards to production, it's fine. The main draw are the action scenes, which were amazing to watch, with the combat being action-packed and appropriately bloody. The fight choreography was amazing and very dynamic, as their immortality would have allowed them to learn how to do all sorts of things, and it also lends credence to claims like Andy forgetting more ways to kill than people are taught. The makeup and special effects used for the wounds and healing were also pretty cool to see in a morbidly grotesque way. And I love how the Old Guard fights so well together, with the unity that comes from not just being a highly trained mercenary outfit, but also as a family that watches each other's backs, given the centuries they've spent together. I also appreciate how Niall was able to join in on that unity without much trouble, since she was an active combat duty Marine who's used to operating as part of a unit. As for the soundtrack, well, this is where my critique for the Old Guard starts. Individually, there's nothing wrong with the songs, as I definitely put some of them in a playlist. The problem comes from how it's used in the film. To put it simply, in the context of the film, the soundtrack sucks, as the techno-electric pop songs do not fit the tone at all. It was annoying at best and took you out of the immersion at worst. It also felt as if the film was allergic to purely instrumental music, and was afraid to have action sequences go by without some kind of song playing, even though they would have benefited from a moment of silence if only to make certain parts of the scene hit harder. But most of my criticism lies with the story itself. As I've already said, the story is bare bones and straightforward, which is fine in and of itself. This is a film where you're meant to turn off your brain and suspend your disbelief after all. However, the story becomes a problem when it does things that turn your brain back on, and makes you go,
"Wait a minute!"
Like in the first fight, where the men who ambushed the Old Guard just pat themselves on the back without disarming and securing their targets. Did they not have orders to lock them down? Or did they think their contractor was tripping when he mentioned their immortality? If he even mentioned it, which I don't see why he wouldn't, considering this was supposed to be a trap. Or what the rules of healing are, because it seems like any injury will heal. So how are they able to have ear piercings, because shouldn't those heal too? Or why was Quinn not able to escape in the 500 years she's been in an Iron Maiden in the ocean? Wouldn't the saltwater have done enough damage to the crude metal for her to break free, even if it did take a few decades? Or why didn't Andy restart the search and rescue for her in modern times, considering how far technology has come by that point? And, spoiler alert, the entire execution of the third act kinda sucks. Sure, the action scenes were great, but the story went downhill as soon as Booker's betrayal was revealed, which makes no sense, by the way. If he just wanted to figure out the secret of immortality so he could end it, why not only give himself up? Why did he also give up the others? Like, sure, Andy might share in his thinking, but Nikki and Joe sure as heck don't. Then Niall going off on not wanting to become so callous with killing like Andy made sense, but her 180 turn not even 15 minutes later did not, due to poor setup. I wish there was a clear emotional change in her expression and body language while she was in the elevator to make that turn more believable. Also, just getting Merrick out of the picture won't do much if the doctor is still around. I don't understand why they didn't even think to kill the doctor or destroy the samples while they made their escape. And there's also a bunch of other small things that are too many to list without making this video longer than it needs to be. But just know that the devil is truly in the details, because once you start thinking, it's hard to stop. And I really don't want to be thinking while watching an action film. Besides the story, there's also way too much shaky cam, or rather, steady cam that's too darn shaky. It's as if the crew never even heard of a tripod, or weren't allowed to use one because every single shot was different degrees of shaky, which gave me a headache near the end. And the runtime felt a little bloated because we sometimes linger a bit too long on something, or a scene feels unnecessarily added in. Like, do we really need to see their journey to the compound in the beginning from start to finish? It's not as if it had any purpose besides showing that Nikki has common courtesy. And what was the point of this drone shot of Merrick's company except to look cool or maybe look ominous? It's really not clear what its purpose was, as it didn't add anything to the narrative. The film would have felt more polished and focused if things like this were cut down, or cut out completely. And I'm not gonna lie, but this film honestly feels more like a 2-hour pilot special for a TV drama, or only made specifically to introduce and set up a more interesting story in a sequel. Overall, The Old Guard gets a B-C+. It's a solid and enjoyable graphic novel adaptation with amazing characters that wholeheartedly sell the lackluster story by adding real and raw emotion that make the immortal trope not feel completely overdone or overly cliche. The action scenes were also really well directed, and Charlize Theron was the best part of the film in all her badass glory. In all honesty though, I believe the film would have worked better and had greater potential as a series, especially as an anthology that jumps around to different points in history to show what the Old Guard were up to and gives us the backstory I found myself wanting to see more of. Because as much as I enjoyed the lore and loved the characters, it had a lot of potential that wasn't fully explored, only introduced and established. And it clearly shows given how the entire third act felt like a deliberate setup for a sequel. Even still, the film was a fun watch with 2 hours seeming to fly by without me noticing, and it didn't even feel like a Netflix film, which I think was the most surprising thing about it. So if you want to watch a film where a bunch of great actors grace the small screen with all their amazing action film glory, feel free to make the choice to Netflix and chill with The Old Guard. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Reminder that this is just my opinion, so you can take it with as many grains of salt as you want. I don't mind either way, and would love to know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment which film you'd like me to give my 2 cents about next. This is some random Neko, going off to watch the old guard for the nth time now. Don't forget to keep calm and just meow.